The late afternoon sun sliced through the blinds of Romano's, casting amber stripes across the checkered tablecloths. I wiped my forehead with the back of my wrist, careful not to let the sweat drip onto the plates I was balancing. 8 hours into my double shift, my feet throbbed inside my worn-out sneakers, and the smell of garlic and tomato sauce that usually comforted me had become suffocating. "Table 7's still waiting on their check, Ellie," Marco, the restaurant manager, called out as I passed the bar. His tone carried the usual edge of impatience he reserved especially for me. I know. I'll get to it right after I drop these off." I forced a smile, though what I really wanted was to sit down, even for just 5 minutes. But rent was due next week, and Dad's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves. Romano's was one of those old-school Italian places in Boston's North End that tourists loved and locals respected. Red leather booths, candles stuck in Chianti bottles, black and white photos of Rome on the walls. Nothing had changed in 30 years, including most of the clientele. Older Italian men who lingered over espresso, discussing business in hushed tones. I'd learned to become invisible here, to slide between tables without disturbing conversations, to refill wine glasses without making eye contact. It was safer that way. The less I was noticed, the fewer questions I'd have to dodge about my bruised wrist or the dark circles under my eyes. My ex, Danny, had a temper, and even though he was gone now, his shadow still followed me. I delivered the plates to table 12, a couple clearly on their first date, both nervous and trying too hard. I envied their hopeful smiles, their future still unwritten. At 27, I felt like my own story had already reached its disappointing conclusion. Single mother working 3 jobs, living in a 1-bedroom apartment with paper-thin walls, and a 4-year-old daughter being raised by my retired father more than by me. The front door chimed as it opened, and a gust of cold October air swept in, making the candles flicker. I didn't look up immediately. Another table, another order, another tip I desperately needed. But the sudden silence that fell over the restaurant made me pause. Even Marco, who never shut up, had gone quiet. 3 men entered, and the atmosphere changed like someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the room. 2 of them were large, with broad shoulders and expressionless faces, the kind of men who occupied space without apology. But it was the 3rd man who drew my eye. Slender but commanding, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my annual salary. He moved with the languid confidence of a predator who had never needed to rush, never had reason to doubt his own power. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on a Roman coin, all sharp angles and symmetrical perfection. His eyes, though, I couldn't see their color from where I stood, but I felt their weight as they scanned the room. Marco hurried forward, bowing slightly. "Mr. Ricci, we weren't expecting you today. Your usual table is occupied, I see." His voice was quiet, accented but clear, like velvet brushed the wrong way. "No matter. That one will do." He gestured toward a booth in my section, the one by the window with the wobbly table that everyone complained about. Marco snapped his fingers at me. "Ellie, clear that table. Now." I swallowed hard, nodding as I rushed to the empty booth, gathering abandoned napkins and water glasses left by the previous customers. I could feel Mr. Ricci's gaze following me, making my skin prickle like I was standing too close to a fire. The men settled into the booth, the 2 larger ones facing outward, their eyes constantly moving, scanning the restaurant. Bodyguards, I realized with a jolt. What kind of man needed bodyguards to eat pasta? "I'll be right with you," I said, the rehearsed waitress line falling from my lips automatically. Mr. Ricci looked up at me then, and I finally saw his eyes, dark amber, almost gold in the dying sunlight. They widened slightly, as if I'd surprised him somehow. For a moment, neither of us spoke, and I had the strangest sensation of time slowing down, of standing on the edge of something vast and dangerous. "Take your time," he said finally, his lips curving into something not quite a smile. "We're in no hurry." But there was an intensity in his gaze that contradicted his casual words, a hunger that made my heart stutter against my ribs. I nodded and retreated to the kitchen, where I pressed my back against the cool tile wall and tried to catch my breath. "Who is that?" I whispered to Sophia, the other waitress, who was loading her tray with bread baskets. She glanced through the round window in the kitchen door. "You don't know?" That's Alessio Ricci. When my face remained blank, she added, The Ricci family owns half the waterfront, real estate, shipping, waste management. She made air quotes around the last words. They say his father was connected, if you know what I mean. Old school. Connected? Like Mafia? I laughed nervously. That's just in movies, Soph. She shrugged. Maybe. But nobody crosses the Riccis, that's all I know. And he's a good tipper, so smile pretty. She nudged me with her elbow before pushing through the door. I took a deep breath and followed, order pad in hand. Are you ready to order? Or would you like a few minutes? I asked, proud that my voice didn't shake. Mr. Ricci, Alessio, looked up at me again, and this time his gaze was calculating, as if he were solving a puzzle. What do you recommend? He asked. The osso buco is excellent today, I said automatically. And the special is... No, he interrupted softly. What do you like? What would you order if you were dining here tonight? The question threw me. Customers rarely cared what I thought, and besides, I ate staff meals in the back. Pasta with whatever sauce was about to expire. The risotto ai funghi is my favorite, I admitted, with the truffle oil. He nodded, as if I'd confirmed something important. Then that's what I'll have. And a bottle of the Barolo. He turned to his companions. Order whatever you like. They murmured their choices, but I barely heard them. I was too aware of Alessio's eyes still on me, studying me with an interest that made me simultaneously want to run away and lean closer. I wrote down their orders with a hand that wasn't entirely steady and escaped back to the kitchen. The rest of their meal passed in a blur of heightened awareness. Every time I approached their table, Alessio would find some reason to extend our interaction, asking about ingredients, inquiring if the wine was from a particular vineyard, requesting extra bread though their basket was still full. By the time I brought their espressos, the restaurant had emptied except for a few lingering couples. The night had fallen completely, and rain had begun to tap against the windows, blurring the streetlights outside into smears of gold and red. Will there be anything else? I asked, setting down the tiny cups. Alessio looked up at me with those amber eyes. Your name. You haven't told me your name. Ellie, I said, then, for reasons I couldn't explain, added, Ellie Connor. Ellie, he repeated, as if tasting the word. Short for Eleanor? I nodded, wondering why I was suddenly conscious of my frayed uniform, my hair escaping its ponytail, the small burn scar on my forearm from a childhood accident. Thank you for your excellent service, Eleanor Connor. He handed me a black credit card. Please add 20% for yourself. I took his card, our fingers brushing briefly, and I felt a shock of something. Awareness, perhaps, or warning, travel up my arm. As I walked away, I could still feel his eyes on me, like a physical touch against my skin. When I returned with his receipt, he had donned a long black coat that made him look even more imposing. He signed with a flourish, then stood. Until next time, Eleanor. His words sounded like a promise, rather than a polite goodbye, and something in me recognized the subtle shift in my world, like the first tremor before an earthquake. I watched them leave, rain splattering against the pavement as one of the bodyguards held an umbrella over Alessio. A sleek black car waited at the curb, its engine purring. Just before he ducked inside, Alessio turned and looked back at me through the window. Our eyes met once more, and he nodded slightly, as if confirming a decision. After they left, I cleared their table and found the receipt. My heart nearly stopped. The tip was more than I made in a week. Told you, Sophia said, peering over my shoulder. The Riccis take care of people they like. Her tone suggested this wasn't entirely a good thing. It's just a tip, I said, trying to convince myself more than her. By the time my shift ended at midnight, the rain had become a torrential downpour. Thunder cracked overhead as I pulled my thin jacket tighter around me. I'd forgotten my umbrella, of course, and the nearest tea station was 3 blocks away. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out into the deluge. The water was freezing, soaking through my clothes within seconds. Wind whipped my hair across my face as I hurried down the deserted street, head down against the storm. The neighborhood, usually so lively, had turned eerie and abandoned, storefronts dark and shuttered. I was so focused on getting to the station that I almost missed it, the sound of screeching tires and a heavy thud. I looked up just in time to see a black car careen around the corner ahead, skidding on the wet pavement before speeding away, its taillights bleeding red in the rain. Something lay crumpled on the sidewalk where the car had swerved, a dark shape that hadn't been there before. My heart lurched into my throat as I realized it was a person. Without thinking, I ran toward the fallen figure, my sneakers splashing through puddles. As I got closer, I could make out a man in a dark coat lying motionless on his side. Blood mixed with rainwater beneath him, creating pale pink rivulets that disappeared into the storm drain. "Hey!" I called, dropping to my knees beside him. "Can you hear me?" The man groaned, shifting slightly. Relief flooded through me. At least he was alive. I fumbled for my phone, but in my panic, it slipped from my wet fingers and clattered to the pavement, the screen going black as water seeped into its cracks. Damn it. I looked around desperately, but the street remained empty. The nearest open business was Romano's, now blocks behind us, and even it would be closing soon. I leaned closer, trying to see the man's face, to assess how badly he was hurt. The streetlight above us flickered, casting momentary illumination over his features. My breath caught. It was him, Alessio Ricci. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead, and his golden eyes were unfocused, clouded with pain. His expensive suit was torn and soaked, one arm bent at an unnatural angle beneath him. "Mr. Ricci?" I touched his shoulder gently. "It's Ellie, from Romano's. Can you hear me?" His eyes struggled to focus on my face. "Eleanor," he murmured, voice thick with pain. "You shouldn't. Not safe." "Don't talk," I said, automatically slipping into the voice I used when my daughter was hurt or scared. "We need to get you help." I looked around again, desperation mounting. Where were his bodyguards? His driver? Had they been in the car that hit him? No, that made no sense. But something was very wrong here. "Can you stand?" I asked, knowing I couldn't leave him lying in the rain, bleeding on the sidewalk. He tried to push himself up, then fell back with a hiss of pain. "My arm," he ground out. "Broken, I think." "Okay, it's okay," I said, though it clearly wasn't. "I'm going to help you. There's a hospital just a few blocks from here." Decision made. I slipped my arm around his waist, bracing myself to take his weight. "On 3, okay? 1, 2, 3. Together we managed to get him upright, though he swayed dangerously, leaning heavily against me. He was taller than I'd realized, and solid with muscle beneath the expensive fabric of his suit. Despite his injury, there was strength in him, a coiled tension that seemed to vibrate through his body. "I can't go to a hospital," he said, voice clearer now. "Take me." He rattled off an address in the Back Bay, an affluent neighborhood I rarely had reason to visit. "That's miles from here, and you need a doctor," I protested. His fingers suddenly gripped my arm, surprising me with their strength. "No hospital, no police. Please, Eleanor." There was something in his voice, not just pain, but a note of genuine urgency that gave me pause. What had happened here? Who had tried to run him down? And why was he alone, without his guards? "Okay," I said finally, though every rational part of me screamed this was a terrible idea. "I'll help you get a taxi." We stumbled together to the main street, a macabre three-legged race. Rain continued to pour down, washing away the blood from his face, soaking us both to the bone. His breath came in short gasps against my ear, his good arm wrapped tightly around my shoulders. As we reached the corner, headlights appeared in the distance, and I raised my free arm, praying it was a taxi. The vehicle slowed as it approached, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows, not a taxi. My stomach clenched with sudden fear. The SUV stopped beside us, and the back door flew open. One of the bodyguards from the restaurant emerged, his face a mask of controlled panic. "Boss!" he exclaimed, rushing to Alessio's other side. "We've been looking everywhere. What happened?" "Later, Franco," Alessio said through gritted teeth. "Get me in the car." The bodyguard, Franco, helped ease Alessio into the back seat, then turned to me with suspicious eyes. "Who are you?" "She's with me," Alessio called from inside the vehicle. "Eleanor comes too." Franco's expression suggested he wanted to argue, but he simply nodded and gestured for me to get in. I hesitated at the open door, rainwater pooling at my feet. Every warning I'd ever received about getting into cars with strangers flashed through my mind, but Alessio wasn't exactly a stranger, was he? And he was injured, possibly seriously. "Please," Alessio said softly from the shadows of the back seat, his golden eyes gleaming. "I owe you my life, Eleanor Connor." I took a deep breath and climbed in beside him, the door closing behind me with a soft, expensive thud. As the SUV pulled away from the curb, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just crossed an invisible line, one I wouldn't be able to step back over. The inside of the SUV smelled of leather and something sharp and metallic. Blood, I realized with a jolt. Alessio leaned back against the seat, eyes closed, his breathing shallow. Rain streaked down the tinted windows, transforming the city lights into abstract paintings of color. "We need to get you to a doctor," I said, watching as he pressed his good hand against his ribs with a grimace. "There will be one waiting at the house." His voice was strained but authoritative. The driver and Franco exchanged glances in the rearview mirror, a silent communication I couldn't decipher. "Who did this to you?" I asked, unable to contain my curiosity despite the warning bells ringing in my head. Alessio opened his eyes, fixing me with that golden gaze. "Someone who will deeply regret it before the sun rises." The calm way he said it sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't an empty threat or bravado. It was a simple statement of fact. We drove in silence after that, weaving through the rain-slicked streets. I should have been planning how to get home after this, worrying about my daughter, Lily, and my father waiting up for me. Instead, I found myself studying Alessio's profile in the intermittent glow of passing streetlights, the sharp line of his jaw, now tense with pain, the long lashes resting against his cheeks, the curve of his lips pressed into a thin line. The SUV eventually turned onto a tree-lined avenue in Back Bay, where historic brownstones loomed like sentinels behind wrought-iron fences. We pulled into a private driveway beside one of the largest buildings. 4 stories of elegant stone with arched windows and a heavy wooden door that looked like it belonged in a medieval castle. Before I could reach for the handle, my door opened from the outside. Another man in a dark suit stood there, raindrops glistening on his close-cropped hair. His eyes widened slightly when he saw me, but he offered his hand without comment. "Thank you," I murmured, stepping out onto the cobblestone driveway. My waterlogged sneakers squelched embarrassingly, my uniform clinging to my body like a second skin. The new bodyguard, there seemed to be an endless supply of them, helped Franco ease Alessio from the car. Though clearly in pain, Alessio refused to be carried, insisting on walking into the house with only minimal support. His pride was palpable, a tangible force that straightened his spine despite his injuries. We entered through a side door that led into a kitchen that could have been featured in a design magazine, all gleaming stainless steel and marble countertops. A middle-aged woman in a robe rushed toward us, her face contorting with shock when she saw Alessio's condition. "Madonna mia! What happened?" Her Italian accent was much thicker than Alessio's, her hands fluttering anxiously around him without actually touching. "It's nothing, Rosa," he said. "Just a small accident." "Nothing? You call this nothing?" She turned to the bodyguards. "Where is the doctor? Why isn't he here yet?" "On his way," Franco assured her. 2 minutes. Rosa finally seemed to notice me, standing dripping on her immaculate floor. "And who is this?" "This is Eleanor," Alessio said, with a hint of warning in his tone that made Rosa press her lips together. "She helped me tonight. She is a guest in this house. Treat her accordingly." Rosa's expression softened marginally. "Of course. Come, both of you, out of those wet clothes before you catch your death." We were ushered through the house, a blur of antiques, oil paintings, and crystal chandeliers, to what appeared to be a guest suite. A fire already blazed in a marble fireplace, casting warm light over the tasteful furnishings. "The doctor will see you in your room," Rosa told Alessio, who nodded and turned to me. "I'll have dry clothes sent for you," he said. "Please make yourself comfortable. I'll come to you once I've been patched up." With that, he was gone, leaving me alone in a stranger's house, in a room worth more than everything I owned. I stood there dripping onto the plush carpet, torn between the practical need to get out of my wet clothes and the growing realization that I was way out of my depth. My phone was ruined, so I couldn't call my father to tell him I'd be late. Lily would be asleep already, thank goodness, but Dad would be worried. He always waited up for me, no matter how many times I told him not to. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Rosa entered, carrying a stack of clothing and towels. "There is a bathroom through there," she said, gesturing to a door on the far side of the room. "I'm afraid these may be a bit large, but they are clean and dry. Thank you," I said, taking the items. "Do you have a phone I could use? I need to let my family know I'm okay." Something flickered in her eyes, surprise, perhaps, or calculation. "Of course. I will bring one after you've changed." The bathroom was larger than my entire apartment, with a shower that had more nozzles than I knew what to do with, and a tub that could have fit 3 people comfortably. I peeled off my wet uniform and stepped under the hot spray, letting it wash away the rain and blood, Alessio's blood, from my skin. As the water sluiced over me, reality began to sink in. I had dragged an injured man, not just any man, but one connected to who knows what kind of criminal activities. Off the street, I had gotten into his car, come to his house, and was now using his shower. Every crime show I'd ever watched screamed that this was how people disappeared, yet strangely, I wasn't afraid. There had been something in Alessio's eyes when he looked at me, a recognition almost, as if he knew me somehow, though we'd only just met. It didn't make sense, but then nothing about this night did. I finished my shower and dressed in the borrowed clothes, a man's silk pajama top that hung to my knees and matching pants I had to roll at the waist and ankles. I towel-dried my hair as best I could, then padded back into the bedroom. Rosa had returned, placing a tray with tea and sandwiches on a small table by the fire. Beside it sat a smartphone. "Mr. Ricci thought you might be hungry," she said. "The phone is for your use. If you need anything else, press 0 on the landline by the bed." "Thank you, Rosa," I said. Is Mr. Ricci okay?" Her expression softened slightly. "The doctor is with him now. He will be fine. He is strong, like his father." There was pride in her voice, and something else, a fierce protective instinct I recognized all too well. It was how I felt about Lily. After Rosa left, I called my father, keeping my explanation vague. A friend had an emergency. I was helping out. Would be home in the morning. He was too tired to question me much, which was a relief. I promised to explain everything tomorrow and hung up feeling both guilty and relieved. I was halfway through a sandwich, the best I'd ever tasted, naturally, when there was another knock at the door. My pulse jumped, though I told myself it was ridiculous to be nervous. "Come in," I called, setting down my tea. Alessio entered, moving more stiffly than before but looking markedly better. The blood had been cleaned from his face, the cut at his temple now neatly stitched. His broken arm was in a sleek black sling, and he had changed into a simple white shirt and dark pants that somehow looked as formal on him as his suit had. "Eleanor," he said, his accent caressing the syllables of my name. "I hope you're feeling more comfortable now." "Yes, thank you," I said, suddenly self-conscious in the borrowed pajamas. "How are you? That was quite a hit you took." He moved to sit in the armchair opposite mine, his movements careful but precise. "Broken arm, 2 cracked ribs, and a mild concussion. It could have been much worse if you hadn't been there." "What happened out there? It looked like someone tried to run you down on purpose." His expression didn't change, but something hardened in his eyes. "That's exactly what happened, but it's not your concern." "Not my concern? I dragged you off the street, ruined my phone, and I'm sitting in your guest room wearing someone else's pajamas," I countered, my exhaustion finally dissolving some of my caution. "I'd say that makes it slightly my concern." To my surprise, Alessio laughed, a warm, rich sound that transformed his face, making him look younger and more approachable. "You're right, of course. Let's just say I have competitors who would prefer I wasn't in the picture." "Competitors in what?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. "Business," he replied simply. Then, changing the subject with practiced ease, "Tell me about yourself, Eleanor Connor. What brings a woman like you to work double shifts at Romano's?" "A woman like me?" I echoed, not sure whether to be offended. "Intelligent, observant, brave enough to help a stranger in the rain." His eyes held mine. "You don't belong there." I looked away, uncomfortable with his assessment and the intensity of his gaze. We all do what we have to do. I have bills to pay, like everyone else. And a family to support? It wasn't really a question. I nodded, wondering how he knew. My daughter Lily, she's 4, and my father who watches her while I work. The child's father? Not in the picture. My tone made it clear I didn't want to elaborate. The last thing I wanted to think about was Danny and his jealous rages, the terror that had driven me to take Lily and run in the middle of the night, leaving behind everything we owned. Alessio studied me, as if piecing together the parts of me I wasn't saying aloud. You said you have bills, medical bills, I think. Your father? I stared at him, startled by his perception. How did you... You mentioned double shifts, which suggests urgency. You look exhausted but well-groomed, so you're not spending money on vices. And you have a particular expression when you mention your father, concern mixed with love. He has a heart condition, I admitted. Insurance covers some, but not all of the treatments he needs. And Boston rent isn't cheap, even in my neighborhood. Alessio nodded thoughtfully. And you work other jobs besides Romano's? Morning shift at a coffee shop near my apartment. Weekend receptionist at a law firm when they need coverage. I shrugged. It's temporary until I can finish my degree. What were you studying? Nursing. I had to drop out when I got pregnant with Lily. I didn't add that Danny had insisted I quit, that he'd hidden my textbooks and deleted my professor's emails when I'd tried to continue. Something softened in Alessio's expression. You should finish. It would be a waste of your intelligence not to. I laughed without humor. Easy to say. Not so easy to do when you're juggling 3 jobs and childcare. Perhaps. He leaned forward slightly, wincing as the movement pulled at his ribs. Eleanor, I owe you a debt. You may have saved my life tonight. I just did what anyone would do, I said, uncomfortable with his intensity. No. His voice was firm. What you did was extraordinary. Most people would have walked by, called an ambulance at most. You put yourself at risk to help me. A stranger. I shrugged, not knowing how to respond. The fire crackled in the hearth, filling the silence between us. It's late, Alessio finally said. You should rest. In the morning, my driver will take you wherever you need to go. Thank you, I said, for the clothes and the room and everything. He stood, moving with that same careful grace despite his injuries. No, Eleanor Connor. Thank you. He paused at the door. Sleep well. You're safe here. After he left, I sat by the fire for a long time, replaying the events of the night in my mind. There was something about Alessio Ricci that both intrigued and unsettled me. A magnetic pull I couldn't quite explain or resist. As I finally slipped between the silken sheets of the guest bed, I told myself this was a one-time encounter, an odd story I'd tell Sophia at work tomorrow. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Somehow, I'd become entangled in Alessio Ricci's world, and something told me he wasn't a man who let go easily of what he considered his. Morning light filtered through heavy brocade curtains, momentarily confusing me as I blinked awake. This wasn't my cramped bedroom with its water-stained ceiling and Lily's stuffed animals scattered across the foot of the bed. The events of last night rushed back. The rain, Alessio lying injured on the sidewalk, this opulent house with its silent hallways and watchful staff. I sat up, running my fingers through my tangled hair. A glance at the ornate clock on the mantelpiece showed it was just past 7, later than I'd usually wake, but still early enough that I might make it home before Lily left for preschool. A soft knock at the door made me start. Come in, I called, pulling the luxurious comforter up to my chest, though I was fully dressed in the borrowed pajamas. Rosa entered carrying a tray laden with breakfast, fresh fruit, pastries, and a steaming pot of coffee that made my mouth water. Good morning, Miss Eleanor, she said, her tone noticeably warmer than last night. I hope you slept well. Very well, thank you. I watched as she set the tray on the small table where I'd eaten sandwiches the night before. Is Mr. Ricci? He is resting, she said. The doctor gave him something for the pain. He asked me to tell you that a car will be ready whenever you wish to leave. She paused, her dark eyes assessing me. He also asked me to give you this. From the pocket of her apron, she withdrew a small velvet box. I took it hesitantly, afraid to open it with her watching. "I'll leave you to enjoy your breakfast," she said, moving toward the door. "When you're ready to depart, simply call down. Your clothes from last night have been laundered and are in the bathroom." After she left, I stared at the box in my palm, its weight insignificant, yet somehow immense. I took a deep breath and opened it. Inside, nestled against black velvet, was a phone, sleek, new, and undoubtedly expensive. A small note lay beneath it, handwritten in elegant script. "To replace the one you lost helping me, my number is programmed in. Use it if you need anything. A.R." My first instinct was to refuse it. It was too much, too personal from a man I barely knew. But practicality won out. I needed a phone, and I certainly couldn't afford to replace mine right now. I set it aside and turned to the breakfast, suddenly ravenous. The pastries were still warm, flaking apart at the lightest touch, and the coffee was strong and perfect. I ate quickly, aware that I needed to get home to Lily and Dad, to explain my absence and prepare for my afternoon shift at Romano's. I found my uniform in the bathroom as promised, cleaned and pressed, all traces of last night's drama removed. As I changed, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The same Ellie Connor as yesterday, outwardly unchanged, yet somehow I felt altered, as if the brief intersection of my life with Alessio Ricci's had shifted something fundamental within me. Once dressed, I slipped the new phone into my pocket and called downstairs. Within minutes, Franco appeared to escort me through the maze-like corridors of the house. In daylight, I could better appreciate the wealth that surrounded me. Priceless artwork, antiques that belonged in museums, windows that looked out over a private garden isolated from the city's noise and grime. "Mr. Ricci asked me to give you this," Franco said as we reached the kitchen door. He handed me an envelope, thick and heavy with what I immediately knew was cash. "I can't accept this," I said, trying to hand it back. Franco's expression remained impassive. "It would be disrespectful to refuse Mr. Ricci's gesture of appreciation. But I don't want his money," I insisted. "I helped him because he needed help, not for payment." Something like respect flickered in Franco's eyes. "Mr. Ricci understands that." "This isn't payment, Miss Connor, it's gratitude." When I still hesitated, he added, "Consider what this could do for your daughter and father." The mention of my family was what did it. I thought of Dad's medication, the specialized treatments his doctor had recommended but insurance wouldn't cover. I thought of Lily's preschool tuition that I struggled to afford each month, the winter coat she needed but I kept putting off buying. I slipped the envelope into my bag without opening it, ignoring the weight of guilt it carried. A sleek black car waited in the driveway, different from the SUV of last night, but equally luxurious. The driver opened the rear door for me without a word. "Thank you," I said to Franco. "Please tell Mr. Ricci I appreciate his kindness." Franco nodded. "He will be in touch, Miss Connor." The words sounded both like a promise and a warning. As the car pulled away from the imposing house, I found myself looking back, half expecting to see Alessio watching from one of the many windows. But the house remained still and shuttered, keeping its secrets. The driver knew my address without my having to provide it, another unsettling reminder of how much Alessio already knew about me. We drove in silence through the morning traffic, the contrast between Back Bay and my own neighborhood growing more stark with each passing block. When we finally pulled up outside my apartment building, with its crumbling brick facade and graffiti-tagged door, I felt a stab of shame, followed immediately by anger at myself for feeling it. This was my home, humble as it was, and I had worked hard for every inch of it. "Thank you for the ride," I told the driver, who simply nodded and waited until I was safely inside the building before driving away. I climbed the 4 flights of stairs to our apartment, my muscles aching from the previous night's ordeal. Before I could insert my key, the door flew open, revealing my father in his bathrobe, his lined face creased with worry. "Ellie, thank God," he said, pulling me into a hug. I was about to call the police. "Your explanation last night was so vague, and then when I tried to call this morning, my phone got ruined in the rain," I explained, hugging him back, breathing in the familiar scent of his aftershave. "I'm sorry I worried you, Dad." "Mommy!" Lily's voice preceded her as she ran from the kitchen, still in her unicorn pajamas, her dark curls a wild tangle around her face. She launched herself at my legs, and I swept her up, burying my face in her neck as she giggled. "I missed you, baby," I whispered. "Were you good for Grandpa?" She nodded solemnly. "I helped make pancakes, and I drew you a picture of a dinosaur eating ice cream." "That sounds amazing," I said, carrying her into our small living room, which doubled as my father's bedroom at night. "I can't wait to see it." Dad followed, his gait slower than it once was, a subtle reminder of his condition. "So are you going to tell me where you really were last night?" he asked. "And whose car was that? Looked like something out of a movie." I set Lily down. "Why don't you go brush your teeth and get dressed for school, sweetie? I need to talk to Grandpa for a minute." Once she had disappeared into the bathroom, I sank onto our worn sofa, suddenly exhausted, despite the night's rest in Alessio's guest room. "It's a long story, Dad. I've got time," he said, sitting beside me, his blue eyes, so like my own, filled with concern. I told him an edited version of the events, finding an injured man, helping him, being offered a place to stay when the rain became too heavy. I left out Alessio's name and any hint of his possible connections to organized crime. Dad had enough to worry about without adding that to the list. "You're too trusting, Ellie," he said when I finished. "This city isn't like the small town we came from. People here—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "I'm fine, Dad. Nothing happened." I patted his knee reassuringly. "And look, they even gave me a new phone to replace my ruined one." I showed him the sleek device, again omitting the details of who exactly had provided it. His frown deepened. "That looks expensive. It was the least they could do, considering I helped their friend," I said lightly. "Now, let me get Lily ready for school, and then you should rest. Did you take your medication this morning?" The change of subject worked, and soon we were back in our normal routine. Hurrying Lily through breakfast, finding her missing shoe, packing her lunch, all while Dad sat at the kitchen table with his pills and tea. The normalcy was comforting after the surreal interlude in Alessio's world. After dropping Lily at preschool, I returned home to shower and change before my afternoon shift at Romano's. I finally opened the envelope Franco had given me, gasping when I saw the amount. It was enough to cover Dad's specialized treatment for 6 months and Lily's tuition for the rest of the year, with plenty left over. My hands trembled as I tucked it into my sock drawer, beneath my winter sweaters. This changed everything, at least temporarily, but I couldn't help wondering what invisible strings might be attached. I arrived at Romano's 20 minutes before my shift, hoping to speak with Sophia before we got busy. She was already there, setting tables, her eyebrows shooting up when she saw me. Well, look who decided to show up," she said. "I thought you might have run off with Mr. Tall, Dark, and Dangerous after your shift last night." I stared at her. "What are you talking about?" She glanced around to make sure Marco wasn't within earshot. "Don't play dumb, Ellie. I saw you leave with Ricci and his men. Or rather, I saw them waiting outside when you left. What happened? Did he invite you to some fancy after-party?" "It wasn't like that," I said, dropping my voice. "There was an accident. He was hurt, and I helped him." Sophia's eyes widened. "Hurt? Alessio Ricci? What happened?" "Car accident," I said vaguely. "Look, it's not a big deal. I just want to forget about it and get back to normal life." "Normal life," she echoed, shaking her head. "Ellie, there's nothing normal about getting involved with the Riccis. Trust me on this." "I'm not involved with anyone," I insisted. "It was one weird night. End of story." She looked unconvinced, but was prevented from pressing further by Marco's arrival. The lunch rush started soon after, and I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction. Yet throughout my shift, I found myself watching the door, half expecting Alessio to appear with his bodyguards and that intense golden gaze. He didn't come, and by closing time, I had almost convinced myself that Sophia was overreacting, that my brief encounter with Alessio Ricci would remain just that, brief. I was wiping down my last table when Marco approached, his usual scowl replaced by an uncharacteristic nervousness. "Ellie, there's someone asking for you," he said, his voice low. "In the back office." My heart stuttered. "Who is it?" "Just go see," Marco said, not meeting my eyes. I made my way to the small office at the rear of the restaurant, my pulse quickening with each step. When I opened the door, however, it wasn't Alessio waiting for me. It was Franco, his broad frame making the cramped space seem even smaller. "Miss Connor," he said with a slight nod. "Mr. Ricci would like to see you. Is he okay?" I asked, genuine concern bubbling up. "His injuries—" "He's recovering well," Franco assured me. "He has a proposition for you and believes it would be best discussed in person." "A proposition?" I echoed, unease creeping up my spine. "A job offer," Franco clarified. "One that would solve your financial concerns permanently." I thought of the envelope in my sock drawer, of Dad's medicine and Lily's future. What kind of job? "That's for Mr. Ricci to explain." Franco checked his watch. "The car is waiting whenever you're ready." I hesitated, torn between curiosity and caution. I should go home first, let my father know. "Of course, we can stop at your apartment on the way." The way. As if my acceptance was already assured. I should have been offended by the presumption, but instead, I felt a flutter of anticipation. What kind of job could Alessio Ricci possibly offer a waitress like me? "Let me get my coat," I said, making my decision. As I followed Franco out the back exit, I caught Sophia watching me, her expression a mixture of worry and resignation. I gave her what I hoped was a reassuring smile, though in truth, I had no idea what I was walking into. The car ride to my apartment was silent, with Franco sitting in the front passenger seat while I stared out the window in the back, watching familiar streets slide by. What was I doing? Getting involved with someone like Alessio Ricci went against every survival instinct I'd developed after escaping Danny. Yet here I was, agreeing to meet him, considering a job offer I knew nothing about. When we reached my building, Franco surprised me by accompanying me upstairs. "Mr. Ricci's orders," he explained when I raised an eyebrow. "Your safety is a priority." The idea that I needed protection in my own building was both insulting and, if I was honest, not entirely unwarranted. The lock on the front door had been broken for months, and just last week, Mrs. Petrov from 3B had her purse snatched in the stairwell. Dad was dozing in his recliner when we entered, but he woke immediately at the sound of the door, his eyes widening at the sight of Franco filling our narrow hallway. "Dad, this is—" I hesitated, unsure how to introduce a Mafia bodyguard. "Franco Vannucci," he supplied smoothly, stepping forward to shake my father's hand with surprising gentleness. "I work for Mr. Ricci. Your daughter has been invited to dinner this evening." Dad looked from Franco to me, concern etched into the lines of his face. "Ricci? As in the Ricci family that owns half the waterfront?" I blinked in surprise. "You know them?" "Everyone who's lived in Boston more than a decade knows the Riccis," Dad said, his tone unreadable. "They've been here since before I was born." Something in his voice made me look at him more closely. There was recognition there, and something else. Respect, perhaps, or wariness. Before I could question him further, Lily burst from her room, stopping short when she saw Franco. "Who are you?" she asked with a 4-year-old's directness, her head tilted back to take in his towering height. Franco's stern expression softened marginally. "A friend of your mother's," he said, reaching into his pocket and producing a small wrapped candy. "For you, if your mother permits." I nodded, and Lily accepted the treat with solemn gratitude, before retreating to the safety of Dad's side, still watching Franco with wide eyes. "I won't be late," I told Dad, bending to kiss his cheek. "There's leftover pasta in the fridge for dinner." "Be careful, Ellie," he murmured, gripping my hand briefly. The intensity in his eyes made me wonder again what he knew about the Riccis that I didn't. I changed quickly into the nicest outfit I owned, a simple navy blue dress I usually saved for job interviews, and ran a brush through my hair. As I applied a touch of mascara and lip gloss, I told myself this was just business, whatever job Alessio was offering. The flutter in my stomach when I thought of seeing him again was nothing more than nerves. Franco waited patiently, somehow managing to look both out of place and completely at ease in our cluttered living room. When I emerged from the bathroom, he gave a short nod of approval. "Ready?" I asked, grabbing my coat and purse. "One moment." Franco stepped closer, lowering his voice so Dad and Lily, now engrossed in a cartoon, Couldn't hear. Mr. Ricci asked me to give you this before we arrive. He handed me a small card with an address written on it, different from the Back Bay mansion of the previous night. Memorize it, then destroy it. For your safety and Mr. Ricci's. The cloak and dagger routine should have seemed absurd, but something in Franco's serious expression stopped the laugh that had risen to my throat. I read the address, a location in the North End, not far from Romano's, then tore the card into tiny pieces and flushed them down the toilet. When we returned to the car, I noticed we were now being followed by a second vehicle, a dark SUV with tinted windows. Franco saw me looking and gave a slight nod. Security protocol. Nothing to worry about. The drive took us deep into the North End, past the tourist traps, and through narrow streets lined with aging tenements and family-owned businesses. We eventually pulled up to an unassuming brick building with a small, discreet sign reading Vesuvio. No windows faced the street, just a heavy wooden door with a small brass knocker. Franco escorted me to the entrance, where another suit-clad man stood guard, his eyes constantly scanning the street. He nodded to Franco and opened the door without a word. Inside was an intimate restaurant with perhaps a dozen tables, most empty at this early dinner hour. The lighting was soft, the decor understated but elegant. Dark wood, crisp white tablecloths, fresh flowers. An older man in a perfectly tailored suit approached us, his smile warm but respectful. "Miss Connor," he said, taking my hand. "Mr. Ricci is waiting for you in the private dining room. Please, follow me." He led us past the main dining area to a door at the back, which opened into a smaller room dominated by a round table. Alessio sat at it, his broken arm still in a sling, though he'd managed to dress impeccably in a charcoal suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. He rose as I entered, and I was struck again by the fluid grace of his movements despite his injuries. "Eleanor," he said, his accent caressing my name, "thank you for coming." Franco positioned himself by the door, as the older man discreetly withdrew, leaving us alone in the candle-lit space. The table was set for two, with fine china and crystal that gleamed in the soft light. "Your injuries look better," I said, unsure how to begin. "They are healing," he agreed, gesturing for me to take a seat. "The doctor tells me I have you to thank for that. If you hadn't found me when you did." He left the sentence unfinished, but his meaning was clear. A waiter appeared with wine, pouring a rich red into our glasses, before vanishing as silently as he'd arrived. "You said you had a job offer for me," I said, getting straight to the point. "I appreciate the dinner invitation, but I should be clear. I'm not looking to get involved in anything complicated." Alessio's lips curved slightly. "By complicated, I assume you mean illegal." I held his gaze. "Yes. I respect your directness, Eleanor." He took a sip of his wine. "Let me be equally direct. I need a personal assistant, someone intelligent, discreet, and trustworthy. The position would include a significant salary, health benefits for you and your family, and a flexible schedule to accommodate your daughter's needs." I blinked, not having expected something so normal. What would this position entail exactly? Managing my calendar, handling correspondence, coordinating with my household staff. He shrugged his good shoulder. "Basic administrative duties. The unique aspect is that the role requires someone I can trust implicitly. And you trust me?" I couldn't hide my skepticism. "You barely know me." "I'm an excellent judge of character," he said simply, "and what I do know about you is impressive. You work multiple jobs to support your family. You stop to help a stranger in a dangerous situation. You refuse payment for that help." His golden eyes held mine. These are the actions of someone with integrity. The waiter reappeared with appetizers, delicate arrangements of seafood that made my mouth water despite my reservations. "What about my current jobs?" I asked, trying to think practically. "You would no longer need them. The salary I'm offering would more than compensate for all three of your current positions combined." I took a sip of wine to hide my surprise. It was rich and complex, probably costing more than I made in a day. "That's generous." "It's fair compensation for the role," Alessio corrected. "The position requires discretion and flexibility. There may be late nights or early mornings. Occasional travel might be necessary. In return, you would have resources to care for your family properly and eventually complete your nursing degree, if that's still your ambition." The mention of my abandoned education caught me off guard. You remembered that. I remember everything about our conversations, Eleanor. His intensity made me look away, focusing instead on the food before me. Why me? I asked finally. There must be dozens of qualified candidates with actual administrative experience. Experience can be gained, trustworthiness cannot. Alessio leaned forward slightly. When you found me on that sidewalk, you could have called an ambulance or the police. For a man in my position, either would have created complications. Instead, you helped me directly, asking nothing in return. That kind of instinctive discretion is rare and valuable to me. A suspicion formed in my mind. Was it really an accident? Or was it a test? Alessio's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or approval. Would it matter if it was? Of course it would, I said, indignation rising. That would mean you manipulated me from the start. It wasn't a test, he said after a moment. The attempt on my life was very real. But your reaction to it revealed your character in a way no interview ever could. The main course arrived, delicate pasta with a sauce that smelled divine. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the tension between us neither uncomfortable nor entirely easy. What does your family think about this dinner? Alessio asked eventually. My father seemed to recognize your name, I admitted. He was concerned. Understandable. The Ricci name carries certain associations in Boston. Are those associations accurate? I asked boldly. Alessio studied me for a moment. My family has been in this city for generations. We've built businesses, created jobs, contributed to the community. Have we always operated strictly within the boundaries of conventional law? No. But we have our own code, one that values loyalty, family, and honor above all else. It wasn't quite an admission, but it wasn't a denial either. And where would I fit into this code? Under my protection, he said simply. You and your family would become an extension of my household. No one would dare harm you. The implication that we might need such protection sent a chill through me. Is that because this job would put us in danger? No. It's because this world can be dangerous, regardless of your association with me. The difference is that without me, you face those dangers alone. His voice softened. I've had you investigated, Eleanor. I know about your ex-husband. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. Ex-boyfriend. I corrected automatically, my voice barely audible. We were never married. But he believes he still has a claim on you, on your daughter. Alessio's tone had hardened. He's been released from prison. Did you know that? The blood drained from my face. Danny had been sentenced to 3 years for assault and battery after he'd put his previous girlfriend in the hospital. It was why I'd felt safe enough to stay in Boston after leaving him, knowing he was locked away. When? I whispered. 2 weeks ago. Good behavior. The contempt in Alessio's voice was palpable. He's been asking questions about you in your old neighborhood. My hands began to tremble. I set down my fork before I dropped it. How do you know this? As I said, I had you investigated. Thoroughly. At least he had the grace not to apologize for the invasion of privacy. Working for me would mean a new apartment in a secure building, with proper security, a better school for Lily, medical care for your father. And all I have to do is answer your phones and manage your calendar? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. And maintain absolute discretion about what you see and hear, he added. Your loyalty would be to me and me alone. The implications hung in the air between us. This wasn't just a job offer, it was an invitation into his world, with all its complexity and danger. Yet the alternative, Danny finding us, the constant struggle to make ends meet, Dad's deteriorating health, seemed suddenly more frightening. I need time to think about this, I said finally. Of course. Alessio reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine briefly. Take all the time you need, but Eleanor, his gaze held mine. I protect what's mine. If you accept this position, you and your family will never have to fear anyone again. I give you my word. The possessiveness in his voice should have alarmed me. Instead, it sent a different kind of shiver through me, not fear, but something far more complicated. As dessert arrived, a delicate tiramisu that melted on my tongue, I found myself imagining a life where Lily could have her own room, where Dad could receive the treatment he needed, where I might finally finish my degree. A life under Alessio Ricci's protection. Under his watchful golden eyes. Would I still be able to see my friends? I asked, thinking of Sophia and her warnings. Your life would remain your own, he assured me, with certain necessary precautions. And if I decide this isn't for me after trying it? Something hardened in his expression. I won't hold you against your will, Eleanor. But once you enter my circle of trust, leaving it becomes complicated, for both our sakes. The warning was clear, and I appreciated his honesty even as it gave me pause. As we finished our meal and Alessio signaled for the check, which never actually appeared, I noticed. I made a decision. 1 month, I said. I'll give it a trial period of 1 month. If it doesn't work out for either of us, we part ways. No complications. Alessio studied me for a long moment, then nodded. 1 month. Starting tomorrow. He extended his hand across the table, and I took it, feeling the warmth and strength of his grip. Welcome to the family, Eleanor Connor. As Franco drove me home that night, the city lights blurring past the window, I wondered what I had just committed to, and why, despite all rational caution, I felt more hopeful than I had in years. 3 weeks into my employment with Alessio Ricci, and my life had transformed beyond recognition. We'd moved into a spacious 3-bedroom apartment in a secure building owned by the Ricci family, one where men in suits discreetly monitored the entrances and cameras watched the hallways. Lily had her own room for the first time, painted lavender at her request, with a window seat overlooking a small park. Dad occupied the 3rd bedroom, his medical care now handled by a private physician who made house calls twice a week. And I had become Alessio's shadow, learning the intricacies of his legitimate business empire. Real estate holdings, shipping companies, restaurants, and more. My days were spent in his office in a renovated warehouse by the harbor, managing his schedule, screening his calls, and gradually understanding the complex web of relationships that constituted his world. He was, I discovered, a man of contradictions, ruthless in business negotiations, yet generous with his employees, intimidating to those who crossed him, yet surprisingly gentle with me. He never raised his voice, never made a crude remark, never treated me as anything less than a respected colleague. Yet beneath his professional demeanor, I felt his attention like a physical touch whenever we were in the same room, his golden eyes following my movements, his hand occasionally brushing mine when I handed him documents. I knew he wanted more than my administrative skills, but he never pressed, never made me uncomfortable. It was as if he was waiting, patient as a predator who knows his prey has nowhere to run. The strangest part was that I didn't want to run. Despite Sophia's warnings and my own initial fears, I found myself drawn to him, fascinated by the power he wielded so effortlessly and the loyalty he commanded from those around him. It was an attraction I fought daily, reminding myself of the risks, of the fact that I still didn't fully understand the darker aspects of his business. Today had been particularly intense. A meeting with representatives from a rival family had run long, the tension in the room thick enough to cut. I'd served coffee and taken notes, feeling the assessing gazes of the other men, knowing they were trying to determine my importance to Alessio based on how he treated me. After they'd left, Alessio had loosened his tie with a sigh, the only visible sign of the strain he'd been under. You did well, he'd told me, that simple praise warming me more than it should have. Not many could remain so composed in that situation. Now, as I stood in my new kitchen preparing dinner, I replayed the moment in my mind. Lily sat at the counter, coloring intently, while Dad napped in his room, his condition already improving under the new medication regimen. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. We never had unexpected visitors. The building's security saw to that. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and moved to the intercom. Yes? Package delivery for Connor, came the response from the lobby. I frowned. Deliveries usually came during the day, and the doorman always called up first. Leave it with the doorman, please. Need a signature, ma'am? Manager's orders. Something felt wrong. I hesitated, remembering Alessio's warnings never to open the door without verification. I pressed the button to call the lobby. Is there a delivery person there for me? I asked the doorman. A pause, too long to be natural. Yes, ma'am. Seems legitimate. but his voice held a note of strain I recognized instantly. The recognition struck like a physical blow. It was the same tension I'd heard in my own voice countless times when Danny was in one of his moods, and I was trying not to trigger him. My blood ran cold. I grabbed my phone and sent a text to the emergency number Alessio had given me. Code red at apartment, Lily with me. The response was immediate, a single word. Bathroom. Lily, honey, I said, keeping my voice casual as I moved to the counter. Let's play hide and seek. You hide in my bathroom, in the big tub. And don't come out until I find you, even if you hear strange noises, okay? It's part of the game. Her eyes widened. She'd always been sensitive to my moods. But she nodded and slipped off her stool, heading for my ensuite bathroom as I'd instructed. Once I heard the door close, I moved to Dad's room, quietly closing his door and locking it from the outside. If Danny had somehow found us, had intimidated the doorman into letting him up, I didn't want him anywhere near my family. The apartment intercom buzzed again, more insistently this time. Ms. Connor? Are you coming down for your package? I didn't respond, instead moving silently to the kitchen drawer where I now kept a small handgun, another of Alessio's precautions that I'd initially resisted but now thanked God for. I'd never fired it outside of the lessons Franco had given me, but I wrapped my fingers around its grip with grim determination. A crash against the front door made me jump, then another. He was trying to break it down. I backed away, gun raised, positioning myself between the door and the hallway that led to the bedrooms. The third crash splintered the lock, and the door flew open to reveal Danny, thinner than I remembered, his face harder, his eyes wild with the same rage that had sent me running 3 years ago. There you are, bitch, he snarled, stepping into my apartment as if he had every right to be there. Took me forever to find you. Nice place you got here. Moving up in the world, huh? Get out, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Right now, Danny, or I swear I'll shoot. He laughed, the sound sending shivers down my spine. No, you won't. You never had the spine for it. His eyes narrowed. Where's my daughter? She's not yours, I said, tightening my grip on the gun. You've never been a father to her. You don't even know her. She's got my blood, he growled, taking another step forward. And I'm not leaving without what's mine. I'm not yours either, I said, my finger moving to the trigger. Not anymore. Something in my tone made him pause, his eyes finally registering the gun in my hands. Since when do you have the balls to point a gun at me? Since I learned my worth, I replied, thinking of Alessio's quiet confidence in me, his insistence that I was stronger than I knew. Now back up and leave, before this gets ugly. Danny's face twisted with fury. You think you can threaten me? After everything I did for you? He lunged forward suddenly, faster than I expected. The gun went off with a deafening crack, the recoil shocking my arm. Danny staggered, clutching his shoulder, disbelief written across his face. You shot me, he said, his voice almost wondering. You actually fucking shot me. Blood seeped between his fingers, but I knew the wound wasn't fatal. My aim had been true, just as Franco had taught me, enough to stop, not to kill. The next one won't be your shoulder, I warned, my voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. Get out, Danny, and don't ever come near my family again. For a moment, I thought he might charge me again, despite the injury. But then the elevator at the end of the hall dinged, and Franco emerged with 2 other men, all with weapons drawn. Mr. Ricci is on his way, Franco said, his eyes taking in the scene. Me with the gun, Danny bleeding but still standing. Shall we escort this gentleman out? Danny looked from Franco to me, realization dawning in his eyes. Ricci? You're with Alessio Ricci now? He laughed, a bitter broken sound. Jesus, Ellie, you went from a street thug to the fucking mob? Talk about an upgrade. Take him out the back, I told Franco, lowering my gun slowly. Make sure he understands what happens if he ever comes near me or my family again. Franco nodded, his expression revealing a new respect as he and his men moved to grab Danny, who didn't resist. As they dragged him away, he called over his shoulder, This isn't over, Ellie, but it was. I knew it deep in my bones. Whatever power Danny had once held over me was gone. shattered like the lock on my door. I set the gun down carefully and went to check on Lily, finding her curled in the bathtub as instructed, her eyes wide with fear but dry. My brave girl. I gathered her into my arms, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, murmuring reassurances that everything was okay now, that the bad man was gone. By the time I'd settled her back with her coloring books, promising that a friend was coming to fix the broken door, Alessio had arrived. He stood in my living room, his presence filling the space in a way that should have been intimidating, but instead felt like safety. His golden eyes took in the splintered doorframe, the small blood stain on the carpet, and finally me, disheveled but unharmed. "You're okay?" he asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. I nodded. "We all are. I shot him. In the shoulder." "Good," Alessio said simply, moving toward me with that fluid grace I'd come to associate with him alone. "Franco told me. I'm proud of you, Eleanor." He reached for me then, his hands gentle as they framed my face. "When I got your message, something raw flashed in his eyes. I've never been so afraid." The admission, from a man who seemed to fear nothing, broke something open inside me. 3 weeks of professional distance, of pretending I didn't feel the pull between us, collapsed like a dam giving way. "I wasn't afraid," I told him, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not after I texted you. I knew you'd come." His thumbs brushed my cheekbones, feather light. "I will always come for you, Eleanor. Always." And then he kissed me, his lips claiming mine with a possessiveness that should have frightened me, but instead felt like coming home. I melted into him, my hands clutching his shirt, drawing him closer as years of loneliness and struggle dissolved in the heat of his touch. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. "I've wanted to do that since the night you dragged me off that sidewalk," he confessed. "Why did you wait?" I asked. "I needed you to choose me," he said simply. "Not the security I could provide, not the financial stability, but me, with all my complications and darkness." I looked up into those golden eyes and saw the truth there, the possessiveness, yes, but also a depth of feeling that matched my own. "I choose you," I whispered. Complications and all. His smile transformed his face, making him look younger, almost boyish. "Then you're mine now, Eleanor Connor, and I protect what's mine." As his lips found mine again, more demanding this time, I realized I'd crossed that invisible line completely now, stepping fully into Alessio Ricci's world with my eyes wide open. There would be challenges ahead, lines to negotiate, boundaries to establish, but for the first time in years, I wasn't facing life's battles alone. I had found my protector, my equal, my match. And in his arms, the faint clink of silverware against porcelain echoed through the restaurant like tiny bells, each sound amplifying my solitude. I shifted in the plush velvet chair, feeling both out of place and invisible in this temple of luxury. The weight of exhaustion hung on my shoulders. A constant companion since becoming both mother and father to my 4-year-old daughter, Lily. "More water, ma'am?" The server's voice startled me from my thoughts, his crisp black uniform a stark contrast to my simple dress bought on clearance 3 seasons ago. "Yes, thank you." My voice came out smaller than intended, as if the opulence of the place had stolen my volume along with my confidence. I shouldn't have been there. The obsidian was far beyond my budget, a cathedral of crystal chandeliers and marble floors where the wealthy came to worship at the altar of exclusivity. But today was my 30th birthday, and after dropping Lily at my neighbor's for a rare overnight stay, I'd made a reckless decision to treat myself to one decent meal. Just one night where I wasn't eating dinosaur-shaped nuggets or mac and cheese from a box. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversation and the occasional burst of practiced laughter. I kept my eyes fixed on the menu, each price making my stomach twist. I'd saved for months for this indulgence, tucking away spare dollars from my paychecks at the hospital where I worked as a nurse's assistant. "The salmon is excellent tonight," the server suggested, noticing my hesitation. I nodded gratefully, closing the leather-bound menu. "The salmon, then." As I waited, I allowed myself to absorb the atmosphere. The heavy scent of expensive perfumes, mingling with aromas from the kitchen, the soft jazz playing from hidden speakers, the warmth from candles casting everyone in a flattering glow. For a moment, I could pretend I belonged. The stillness shifted suddenly. Like animals sensing a predator, the other diners subtly straightened. Conversations falling to whispers. The air itself seemed to change, charged with an electric current of deference and fear. I didn't immediately notice him. Instead, I felt him first, a presence that altered the gravity of the room. My eyes lifted just as he moved past my table, a tall figure in a perfectly tailored suit that made the expensive clothes of other patrons look like department store bargains. Dark hair, cut precisely, framed features that seemed sculpted rather than grown, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes the color of aged whiskey. He was flanked by two men whose stiff postures and scanning gazes marked them as security rather than companions. One whispered something in his ear, causing those intense eyes to flick directly to my table. I looked away instantly, heart hammering against my ribs. Something primal warned me not to be caught staring at this man. I pretended to be fascinated by the pattern on my napkin, while feeling the weight of his gaze settle on me like a physical touch. "Who is she?" I heard him ask, voice low, but carrying in the suddenly hushed restaurant. I didn't catch the response, but I felt the atmosphere shift again as he continued toward a private area at the back of the restaurant. Only then did I release the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "You've caught his attention," my server murmured, as he returned with my water, his professionally neutral expression betrayed by the tension around his eyes. That was Mr. Castillo. The name should have meant nothing to me, but a shiver traced my spine nonetheless. There was something in the way the server said it, a reverence tinged with fear, that told me this wasn't just any wealthy businessman. My salmon arrived, beautifully plated but now tasting like ashes in my mouth, as I felt occasional glances from the private section burning into my back. I ate mechanically, regretting my decision to come here, wishing I'd chosen the anonymous diner instead. This birthday treat had transformed into an ordeal to be endured. I was nearly finished when the server returned, this time with a glass of dark red wine I hadn't ordered. "Compliments of Mr. Castillo," he said, placing it beside my plate. I didn't order this," I stammered, panic rising in my throat, "and I can't accept. It would be impolite to refuse." The server interrupted softly, his expression conveying what his words didn't. This wasn't a suggestion. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the glass, taking the smallest sip possible. The wine was rich and complex, probably costing more than my weekly grocery budget. I set it down quickly, determined to finish my meal and leave as soon as possible. When I asked for the check, the server shook his head. "Your meal has been taken care of, Ms. Harper," I supplied automatically before I could stop myself. "Emma Harper. But I can't accept. Mr. Castillo insists." Again, that tone that brooked no argument. I nodded, gathering my worn purse and cardigan. As I stood, I made the mistake of glancing toward the private section. Through a gap in the privacy screens, those whiskey-colored eyes caught mine. "Mr. Castillo raised his glass slightly in acknowledgement, his expression unreadable but intense. Something in that gaze made me feel simultaneously seen and hunted. I hurried out, the cool night air a relief after the stifling atmosphere inside. My ancient Honda sat like an eyesore among the gleaming luxury vehicles in the parking lot. As I fumbled for my keys, a sleek black car pulled up beside me, the window lowering to reveal one of Mr. Castillo's security men. "Ms. Harper," he said, my name in his mouth sending another chill through me. "Mr. Castillo would like to ensure you get home safely. Allow us to escort you." "That's really not necessary," I said, backing away slightly. "I only live 15 minutes from here." It wasn't a request. His tone remained polite, but the underlying steel was unmistakable. Before I could protest further, the back door opened, and there he was, Alexander Castillo, regarding me with those intense eyes that seemed to strip away my defenses. "Please, join me," he said, his voice deep and smooth like the wine he'd sent to my table. "I insist." In that moment, I made what would prove to be the most consequential mistake of my life. Instead of running, instead of screaming, instead of causing the scene that might have saved me from what was to come, I slipped into the back seat beside him. The door closed with a soft click that sounded to my ears like a cage snapping shut. "Emma Harper," he said, my name on his lips somehow sounding like both a caress and a claim. Tell me, what brings a woman like you to my restaurant? Alone? On a Tuesday night? It's my birthday, I admitted, the words escaping before I could consider them. Something flickered in his eyes, interest, perhaps, or calculation. A birthday should never be celebrated alone. He studied me, gaze lingering on my hands, my face, my simple clothes. You have a child. It wasn't a question. I glanced down at my purse, where a small unicorn keychain, Lily's gift to me this morning, hung from the zipper. A daughter, I confirmed reluctantly. She's 4. And her father? The bluntness of the question startled me. Not in the picture. He nodded, as if confirming something to himself. Address? He asked, and when I hesitated, added, so we can take you home, Emma. The way he said my name, so familiar, so possessive already, should have warned me. But exhaustion and the lingering effects of the wine clouded my judgment. I gave him my address, watching as he relayed it to the driver with a quiet command. As the car glided through the night streets, I realized with growing unease that Alexander Castillo hadn't stopped looking at me, his gaze a physical weight I couldn't shake. In the confined space of the car, I caught his scent, expensive cologne with undertones of something darker, something dangerous. Why did you pay for my meal? I finally asked, needing to break the charged silence. A smile curved his lips, not quite reaching those predatory eyes. Let's call it a birthday gift. From a complete stranger, I countered, finding a spark of courage. We're hardly strangers now, Emma, he replied. I know your name, where you live, that you have a daughter, and that you were dining alone on your birthday in a restaurant where you clearly felt out of place. He leaned slightly closer. I find I want to know more. The car stopped outside my apartment building, a modest complex that looked even shabbier through the tinted windows of his luxury vehicle. Thank you for the ride, I said stiffly, reaching for the door handle. His hand caught mine, warm and strong, the touch sending an involuntary shiver through me. One more thing, he said, producing a business card seemingly from nowhere. When you need anything at all, call this number. I took the card automatically, the heavy cardstock embossed with just a phone number, no name. Why would I need anything from you? I asked, finding another flicker of defiance. Alexander Castillo smiled again, this time showing a flash of perfect white teeth that reminded me of a predator's warning. Because, Emma Harper, he said, releasing my hand, but somehow making me feel more captured than before. Everyone eventually needs something from someone like me. I escaped the car, clutching my purse and the business card, feeling his eyes on my back until I disappeared into my building. Only when I was safely inside my apartment, door locked and chained, did I allow myself to breathe. On my refrigerator, Lily's crayon drawing smiled at me, a stick figure of her and me, holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. Normal, safe, my world. I looked down at the business card in my trembling hand, suddenly certain that my world had just tilted irrevocably on its axis. What I couldn't have known then, as I slipped the card into my wallet instead of tearing it to pieces as I should have, was that Alexander Castillo had already decided I belonged to him, and men like Alexander Castillo always took what they wanted. 3 days passed in blissful normality. I worked my shifts at St. Mary's Hospital, picked Lily up from preschool, and tried to convince myself that the encounter with Alexander Castillo had been nothing more than an unsettling birthday adventure, a story I might someday tell with a nervous laugh. The business card remained in my wallet, untouched but not forgotten. Sometimes during quiet moments, I found myself running my finger over the embossed number, wondering what would happen if I called. I never did. On Thursday afternoon, I was helping Lily build a castle out of mismatched blocks when someone knocked on our apartment door. Unexpected visitors were rare in our quiet life. Stay here, sweetie, I told Lily, my heart inexplicably racing as I approached the door. Through the peephole, I saw a delivery man holding an elaborate arrangement of white roses. Frowning, I opened the door a crack, security chain still in place. Emma Harper? He asked, consulting his clipboard. Yes? Delivery for you. I unlatched the chain and accepted the flowers. At least 24 pristine roses nestled among fragrant greenery, wrapped in heavy cream paper tied with a silk ribbon. The delivery man nodded and left without waiting for a tip, which was fortunate since I had none to give. "Pretty," Lily exclaimed, abandoning her blocks to examine the flowers. "Is it your birthday again?" "No, sweetie." I searched for a card among the blooms and found a small envelope. Inside was a heavy cardstock note with only 3 words in elegant script. "Happy belated birthday." No signature. But I didn't need one. The knot in my stomach tightened as I realized Alexander Castillo knew where I lived, not just my building, but my specific apartment. The roses suddenly seemed less like a gift and more like a message. "I can reach you whenever I want." That night, after tucking Lily into bed, I searched Alexander Castillo's name online. What I found sent chills crawling up my spine. The official articles described him as a successful entrepreneur, with interests in real estate, import and export businesses, and several high-end restaurants, including the Obsidian. But between the lines of respectability ran darker threads, investigations that mysteriously ended, competitors who disappeared, and whispered associations with organized crime. Alexander Castillo wasn't just wealthy, he was dangerous. And for some unfathomable reason, he had fixed his attention on me. The next morning, I dropped Lily at preschool and hurried to work, hyper-aware of my surroundings. Every black car made my pulse quicken. Every suited man became a potential threat. I was jumping at shadows, but the shadows seemed to be watching back. "You okay, Emma?" asked Diane, the head nurse, as I fumbled a stack of patient charts. "You seem distracted today." "Just tired," I lied, forcing a smile. "Lily had nightmares last night." Diane nodded sympathetically. "Single parenting is tough." "Hey, if you need an extra shift next week, we're short-staffed on Tuesday." "I'll take it," I said quickly, mentally calculating how the additional hours would help with next month's rent. Since Lily's father had vanished 2 years ago, taking my savings and leaving nothing but debt, I'd been perpetually treading financial water. As my shift ended, I headed to the staff locker room to change out of my scrubs. The room was empty except for me, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as I pulled on my jeans and sweater. When I closed my locker, I nearly screamed at the reflection in the small mirror, a man standing behind me, one of Alexander Castillo's security guards, the same one who had spoken to me outside the restaurant. "Jesus," I gasped, spinning around. "How did you get in here? This is staff only." His expression remained impassive. "Mr. Castillo would like to see you." Fear and indignation warred within me. "I'm picking up my daughter in 20 minutes. Arrangements have been made. Your neighbor, Mrs. Chen, will watch her until later this evening." Ice flooded my veins. "You spoke to Mrs. Chen? How do you even know?" "Mr. Castillo is a thorough man," he interrupted, as if this explained everything. "The car is waiting." I thought about screaming, about running to security, about calling the police, but something in the man's calm certainty told me none of those options would end well. Alexander Castillo had tentacles everywhere, it seemed. "What does he want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "That's between you and him." He gestured toward the door. "Shall we?" The same sleek black car waited in the staff parking lot. This time, Alexander wasn't inside. Instead, I rode alone in the back, while the security guard sat with the driver, the privacy glass raised between us. We drove for nearly 30 minutes, leaving the familiar parts of the city behind until we reached an exclusive waterfront neighborhood, where mansions stood behind high gates and private security. The car pulled up to an imposing estate protected by a stone wall and wrought iron gates that opened silently at our approach. The house itself was a modernist statement of glass, stone, and clean lines, perched on a cliff overlooking the water. Beautiful, but fortress-like. I was escorted inside through a cavernous foyer with marble floors and art pieces that belonged in museums. The security guard led me through the house to a terrace overlooking the ocean, where Alexander Castillo sat reviewing documents at a glass table. He looked up as I approached, those whiskey-colored eyes warming with something that made my stomach tighten. He wore casual clothes today, if a shirt that probably cost more than my monthly rent could be considered casual. The sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms lightly dusted with dark hair. "Emma," he said, standing and dismissing the security guard with a slight nod. "Thank you for coming." Did I have a choice? The words slipped out before I could stop them. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. There are always choices, but I'm glad you made this one. He gestured to the chair across from him. Please, sit. Would you like something to drink? Water? Wine? Coffee? Water, I said, reluctantly taking the offered seat. The ocean view was breathtaking, the late afternoon sun casting golden light across the waves. He poured water from a crystal pitcher himself, rather than summoning staff, a small gesture that nonetheless felt significant. His movements were precise and controlled, like everything about him. You're upset about the flowers, he said, setting the water glass before me. Not a question. I'm upset that you know where I live, that you contacted my neighbor, that you're interfering with my life, I replied, finding courage in anger. I don't know what you want from me. Alexander studied me with those penetrating eyes. What I want is simple, Emma. Your company. My company, I repeated flatly. You could have anyone. Models, actresses, socialites. Why are you fixated on a single mother who can barely afford to eat at your restaurant? He leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving mine, because when I saw you sitting alone in that restaurant, so clearly out of place, yet holding yourself with such quiet dignity, I saw something rare, authenticity. Do you know how unusual that is in my world? I took a sip of water, using the moment to collect my thoughts. So I'm a novelty, a curiosity. You're a mystery I find myself wanting to solve. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. Tell me about yourself, Emma Harper. There's nothing to tell. I work at St. Mary's Hospital. I raise my daughter. I try to make ends meet. And Lily's father? The question hit a tender spot. Gone. He cleaned out our savings and disappeared when Lily was 2. I later found out he had gambling debts. Something darkened in Alexander's eyes. His name? Why does it matter? I hesitated, then relented. Marcus Denton. Alexander nodded almost imperceptibly, as if filing the information away. The casual way he asked, the intensity of his interest, it unsettled me deeply. What do you actually want from me, Mr. Castillo? Alexander, he corrected gently. And I told you, your company, dinner perhaps, conversation. Nothing more complicated than that. Nothing was ever that simple, especially with men like him. And if I say no? He sat back, regarding me calmly. Then Raymond will drive you home, and you'll never hear from me again. The offer of freedom should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like a test, one whose rules I didn't understand. Just like that. I don't force my company on unwilling women, Emma. His tone carried a hint of offense. Yet here I was, brought to his home without my explicit consent. The contradiction hung in the air between us. One dinner, I found myself saying, though a wiser part of me screamed to take the escape offered. And then you'll leave me alone if that's what I want? A smile spread across his face. Genuine this time, transforming his severe features into something devastatingly handsome. One dinner. You have my word. As if on cue, a staff member appeared from inside the house. Dinner is ready to be served when you are, sir. I blinked in surprise. You already had dinner planned? You were that confident? Alexander stood, offering his hand to help me up. I'm always prepared for multiple outcomes. Shall we? I ignored his hand, rising on my own, unwilling to touch him just yet. He accepted this small rebellion with grace, leading me to an intimate dining room with windows overlooking the darkening ocean and a table set for 2 with fine china and crystal. The meal was exquisite, course after course of perfectly prepared dishes paired with wines I couldn't begin to identify. Throughout dinner, Alexander asked questions about my life, listening with unexpected interest to my mundane stories about hospital work and raising Lily. He revealed little about himself in return, deflecting personal questions with practiced ease. You know everything about me, and I know almost nothing about you, I observed as dessert was served. A delicate chocolate creation that probably contained more calories than I usually consumed in a day. What would you like to know? He asked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. What do you really do? I ventured boldly. Beyond the restaurants and businesses mentioned in articles, his eyes gleamed with something like approval. I solve problems for people who can't solve them through conventional channels. I provide protection, arbitration, and certain specialized services. You're in the Mafia, I translated bluntly. He didn't flinch. That's an outdated term. I prefer to think of myself as operating within the gray areas of society. Areas that exist whether people acknowledge them or not. Is that supposed to make me feel better about sitting across from you? No, he said simply. It's meant to answer your question honestly. I respect you too much to lie. The statement caught me off guard. Respect wasn't what I expected from a man like him. After dinner, Alexander led me to a sitting room where a fire crackled in a stone hearth despite the mild evening. It's getting late, he said. Raymond can drive you home now, or... He paused, studying my face. You seem exhausted, Emma. I have several guest rooms. You're welcome to stay the night and return home refreshed in the morning. Alarm bells rang in my head. My daughter is being well cared for by Mrs. Chen, who I've arranged to compensate generously for her time. He finished smoothly. I've also taken the liberty of having some clothes delivered for you, should you choose to stay. The casual display of power, arranging my life, my child care, even my clothing, should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a confusing mixture of indignation and relief. For years, I'd carried every burden alone, made every decision, solved every problem. Having someone simply handle things was both intrusive and oddly freeing. Why are you doing all this? I asked, genuinely bewildered. What could you possibly want from me that's worth this effort? Alexander moved closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Perhaps I'm tired of people who want things from me. My money, my power, my protection. Perhaps I find it refreshing to be with someone who wants nothing. I do want something, I corrected him. I want you to leave me and my daughter alone after tonight. A shadow crossed his face. Is that truly what you want, Emma? The question hung in the air between us, heavier than it should have been. In the firelight, his eyes seemed to glow with an intensity that made my breath catch. I want to go home, I said finally, my voice barely audible. Something that might have been disappointment flickered across his features, before his expression smoothed into polite acceptance. Of course. Raymond will take you. As we walked toward the foyer, Alexander's phone rang. He checked the screen, his jaw tightening. Excuse me for a moment. This is important. He stepped away to take the call, his voice too low for me to hear. When he returned, his expression had hardened, all traces of the charming dinner companion gone. There's been a development, he said, his tone clipped. It concerns your daughter's father. My blood froze in my veins. Marcus? What about him? Alexander's eyes held mine, unreadable and dark. He's back in the city, and he's looking for you. That's impossible. The words came out as a whisper, my legs suddenly unsteady beneath me. Marcus disappeared 2 years ago. Alexander guided me to a nearby chair, his hand at my elbow both supportive and possessive. He returned 3 days ago. My sources inform me he's accumulated even more significant debts than before. Your sources? I stared up at him, pieces clicking into horrible place. You've been investigating me, my past, my life. He didn't deny it. I make it a point to know everything about people who interest me. A chill ran through me despite the warmth of the room. How would Marcus even know where to find us? We moved after he left. I changed my phone number, my email, everything. Alexander's expression darkened. People like Marcus have ways of finding what they're looking for when motivated enough. And it seems he's very motivated. By what? He took everything when he left. My voice cracked on the last word, memories surfacing of those devastating days. Discovering our joint account emptied, credit cards maxed out, even Lily's small college fund gone. Alexander crouched before me, bringing his face level with mine, those intense eyes capturing my gaze. Emma, I need you to listen carefully. Men with gambling debts as severe as his don't simply want money. They're desperate, and desperate men are dangerous. Fear clawed at my throat as I thought of Lily. Her innocent smile, her complete trust in me to keep her safe. What does he want from us? According to my information, he believes you have something of value. That's ridiculous. Everything of value went with him. Alexander's expression remained grave. Not everything. He's been telling his creditors about an inheritance. Confusion replaced some of my fear. Inheritance? My parents left me nothing but medical debt when they died. Your grandmother's jewelry, Alexander said quietly. The pieces you keep in the small wooden box on your closet shelf. I recoiled, genuinely frightened now by how much he knew about my private life. How could you possibly? As I said, I'm thorough. He rose and moved to pour 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. The point is, Marcus has convinced some very unpleasant people that these pieces are worth a substantial amount. They're not, I said, accepting the glass he offered, more for something to hold than any desire to drink. Just sentimental pieces, a few gold necklaces, some rings with small stones, nothing valuable. Alexander gave me a look that contained something like pity. Value is relative, Emma. To collectors of certain vintage pieces, they might be worth more than you realize. But that's irrelevant. What matters is that Marcus has promised these items as payment, and the people he owes aren't known for their patience or understanding when promises are broken. The implications hit me like a physical blow. You think he'll come after us, after Lily? I know he will. Alexander's certainty chilled me more than any speculation could have. In fact, he's already been watching your apartment building. My men noticed him yesterday. The glass nearly slipped from my fingers. Yesterday? And you didn't think to warn me? My daughter was there, alone with a babysitter while I worked a double shift. You were never in immediate danger, he said, his tone suddenly cold and authoritative. I've had people monitoring your apartment since the night we met. The revelation should have comforted me. Instead, it intensified my alarm. You've been watching us? For days? Protecting you, he corrected, as if the distinction was crucial. My mind raced through the implications. Alexander Castillo, a man who operated in the gray areas, as he put it, had been having me and my daughter watched. The same man who had somehow discovered intimate details about my life, my past, even the contents of my closet. The same man who had effectively forced me to have dinner with him tonight. And yet, the same man who was now warning me about a very real threat to my daughter's safety. I need to go home. Now. I set down the untouched drink and stood. I need to get Lily and... I stopped, realizing I had nowhere to go, no safe haven, no resources to protect us. Alexander watched the realization dawn on my face. Stay here tonight, he said, his voice gentler now. Both of you. I'll send Raymond to collect Lily and Mrs. Chen. They'll be here within the hour. In your home? With you? The idea seemed both outrageous and, in light of what he'd just told me, grimly sensible. This house has state-of-the-art security, and my most trusted men guarding it. No one enters without my explicit permission. He moved closer, not touching me, but enveloping me in his presence nonetheless. Emma, whatever you may think of me, whatever reservations you have, and they're valid, I can keep you safe, both of you. The sincerity in his voice was compelling. Or perhaps it was simply that I had no better options. Just for tonight, I conceded, hating how quickly I'd gone from defiance to dependence. And tomorrow we figure out a more permanent solution. Something flickered in his eyes, satisfaction perhaps, but it was gone too quickly to identify. Of course, I'll make the arrangements. Within the hour, Lily arrived, sleepy-eyed and confused in her pink pajamas, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Mrs. Chen had packed a small overnight bag with Lily's essentials. Mama, this house is like a castle, Lily whispered when I scooped her into my arms, her eyes wide as she took in the grand foyer. Are we on vacation? Something like that, sweetheart, I murmured, breathing in her familiar scent of baby shampoo and the faint sweetness that was uniquely hers. Just for tonight. Alexander appeared at the top of the sweeping staircase, having changed into more casual clothes, though still impossibly elegant. He descended slowly, his eyes fixed on Lily with an expression I couldn't decipher. You must be Lily, he said when he reached us, his deep voice softening as he crouched to her eye level. I'm Alexander. This is my home. Lily regarded him solemnly, still clutching her rabbit. Do you have a swimming pool? Castles always have swimming pools in my books. A genuine smile transformed Alexander's face, making him look younger, almost boyish. I do, in fact. Perhaps tomorrow your mother will let you see it. We won't be imposing that long, I interjected quickly. Alexander straightened, that unreadable expression returning. Let me show you to your rooms. I've had the staff prepare the blue suite. It has connecting bedrooms, so Lily can be close to you. The blue suite proved to be larger than our entire apartment, with a sitting area, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom that featured a shower big enough for 4 people and a tub that resembled a small pool. Everything was decorated in soothing shades of blue and cream, elegant, but somehow still welcoming. This is beautiful, I admitted, as Lily explored the rooms with delighted gasps and exclamations. It's yours for as long as you need it, Alexander said, leaning against the doorframe, watching Lily with that same curious expression. Is there anything else you require tonight? I shook my head, suddenly overwhelmed by the day's events. No, this is more than enough, he nodded, his gaze returning to me. There are clothes for both of you in the dressers. I had my assistant make some educated guesses about sizes. The thought of him selecting clothing for us, or more likely, instructing some employee to do so, made me deeply uncomfortable, but I was too exhausted to protest. Thank you. Sleep well, Emma, he said, lingering a moment longer than necessary before turning to leave. At the door, he paused. My bedroom is at the end of this hallway, should you need anything during the night. His eyes held mine meaningfully. Anything at all. After he left, I helped Lily brush her teeth and tucked her into the child-sized bed in the connecting room, which someone had thoughtfully prepared with fresh linens decorated with cartoon characters. She fell asleep almost instantly, the day's excitement having worn her out. I took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away some of my stress, before slipping into a silk nightgown I found in the dresser, exactly my size, as promised. The garment was modest enough, but the quality and feel of it against my skin made me acutely aware that it probably cost more than I made in a day. Sleep evaded me despite my exhaustion. I kept replaying Alexander's warnings about Marcus, imagining worst-case scenarios, feeling the walls of some invisible cage closing around me. After tossing for an hour, I slipped out of bed and padded to the sitting area, hoping to clear my mind. Through the windows, moonlight spilled across a landscaped garden and reflected off the dark ocean beyond. The view was breathtaking, but it only emphasized how far I was from my normal life, how quickly everything had changed. A soft knock at the outer door startled me. When I opened it, Alexander stood there, still fully dressed despite the late hour. I saw the light, he explained, nodding toward the lamp I'd switched on. May I come in? There are developments we should discuss. I glanced back toward Lily's room, confirming her door was closed, then reluctantly stepped aside. Alexander entered, his presence immediately filling the space in a way that made it hard to breathe. His eyes swept over me in the nightgown, before returning to my face with a heat that made my cheeks warm. Developments? I prompted, crossing my arms over my chest. He moved to the small bar in the corner, pouring himself a drink. Marcus made contact with his creditors this evening. He's promised delivery of the items by tomorrow night. My stomach dropped. He doesn't have them. He can't get into my apartment. No, but he's desperate enough to try. Alexander sipped his drink, watching me over the rim of the glass. Which means we need to consider your options beyond tonight. We? The word slipped out more sharply than I intended. His eyes narrowed slightly. Yes, Emma. We. Because whether you like it or not, your problems and mine have become intertwined. How exactly are my problems yours? I challenged, finding a spark of defiance despite my vulnerability, standing before him in borrowed silk in his home. Alexander set down his glass and moved closer, his movement deliberately slow, as if approaching a frightened animal. The moment I noticed you in my restaurant, the moment I decided to learn your name, to seek your company, that was the moment your safety became my concern. He stopped just short of touching me. And I protect what's mine. I'm not yours, I whispered, even as something deep inside me responded to his possessive tone. Aren't you? His voice dropped lower, intimate, in the quiet room. You're in my home, wearing clothes I provided, sleeping under my protection. Your daughter is safe because I made it so. The truth of his words stung. In less than a week, I had become dependent on him in ways I couldn't have imagined. The independent life I'd built since Marcus left suddenly seemed fragile, an illusion of security that had shattered at the first real threat. "What are my options then?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. "Stay here," he said immediately. "Not just tonight, but until the situation with Marcus is permanently resolved." The implication in permanently resolved sent a chill through me. "And how long would that be?" "As long as necessary." He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face with surprising gentleness. "I have a proposal, Emma, one that would solve your immediate problems and potentially offer a more lasting arrangement." I stepped back from his touch. "What kind of proposal?" "A position has recently opened in my household staff, a live-in role, overseeing certain domestic operations. The previous employee has retired after many years of service." I stared at him in disbelief. "You want me to be your housekeeper?" A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Not exactly. The role is more of a household manager, overseeing staff schedules, managing social calendars, ensuring the smooth operation of this and my other properties. It comes with a generous salary, private accommodations for you and Lily, and all living expenses covered. Lily would have access to the best schools, the best opportunities." The offer was both tempting and terrifying. "And what would you expect in return for this generosity?" His eyes darkened. "Your presence, your loyalty." He moved closer again, this time not stopping until bare inches separated us. "I find I enjoy having you near, Emma. The rest would develop naturally if you were amenable." The implication was clear. This wasn't just a job offer, it was something far more complicated and dangerous. An arrangement where the lines between employee and something else would inevitably blur. "And if I say no, then I'll still ensure your safety until the Marcus situation is resolved. I'll help you find suitable accommodations elsewhere, perhaps in another city where he can't find you. I'll make sure you and Lily are financially secure." His expression remained impassive. "I told you before, I don't force my company on unwilling women." Yet the power imbalance between us made any notion of choice seem almost laughable. He held all the cards, the resources, the information, the protection Lily and I desperately needed. "I need time," I said finally. "To think." He nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. It wasn't a rejection, and he knew it. "Of course. Take all the time you need." As he turned to leave, a sudden thought occurred to me. "Alexander," I called after him, the first time I'd used his first name voluntarily. "How did you know about my grandmother's jewelry? Really?" He paused at the door, considering me for a long moment. "When I became interested in you, I had your apartment thoroughly searched. Standard procedure when I'm considering bringing someone into my life." The casual admission of such a profound violation left me speechless. "Rest well, Emma," he said, closing the door behind him, leaving me alone with the uncomfortable knowledge that my life had already been changed beyond recognition, and that some part of me, some traitorous, previously unknown part, didn't entirely mind. I returned to bed where sleep continued to elude me. In the connecting room, Lily slept peacefully, unaware of the dangerous currents swirling around us, currents that seemed increasingly likely to sweep us into Alexander Castillo's world permanently. Morning arrived with disorienting brightness. For a moment, lying in the luxurious bed, I couldn't remember where I was. Then reality came flooding back. Alexander Castillo, Marcus's return, the proposal that had kept me awake most of the night. Lily's excited voice drifted from the connecting room. Following the sound, I found her sitting cross-legged on her bed, chatting animatedly with a woman in a crisp uniform who was arranging a breakfast tray. "Mama, look, pancakes shaped like bunnies," Lily exclaimed, pointing to the elaborately presented breakfast. The staff member straightened, offering me a polite smile. "Good morning, Ms. Harper. Mr. Castillo asked that breakfast be served in your suite. He thought Miss Lily might enjoy it." "Thank you," I managed, still trying to process the strangeness of waking up to servants and bunny-shaped pancakes. "Is Mr. Castillo around?" "He left early for business, but asked me to inform you that he'll return by noon. He also requested that you and Miss Lily remain on the property today." Her expression remained professionally neutral, but I detected a hint of curiosity in her eyes. Clearly, our presence was unusual enough to spark interest among the staff. After she left, Lily and I shared the extravagant breakfast. I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, smiling at her excitement over the pancakes and fresh fruit. But my mind kept returning to Alexander's proposal and the looming threat of Marcus. "Can we see the swimming pool today?" Lily asked, her face sticky with syrup. "Maybe," I hedged, helping her clean up. "First, let's explore inside, and you need a bath, little miss." After bathing Lily and dressing us both in the clothes provided, simple but expensive items that fit us perfectly, we ventured out of the suite. A security guard stationed at the end of the hallway nodded respectfully, but made no move to stop us as we wandered through the sprawling house. The place was a labyrinth of elegant rooms, each more impressive than the last. Lily was enchanted, especially by the library with its floor-to-ceiling shelves and rolling ladder. We spent an hour there, reading from a collection of children's books that seemed suspiciously new, as if they'd been purchased specifically for her visit. Around 11, we discovered the indoor pool, a magnificent space with a glass ceiling that bathed the water in natural light. Lily pressed her face against the glass doors, her expression pleading. "Please, Mama, just for a little while?" I hesitated, but the hopeful look in her eyes won me over. "All right, but we don't have swimsuits." "Actually, you do." The voice came from behind us, making me jump. Alexander stood there, earlier than expected, watching us with that now familiar intensity. He'd changed from the business attire he must have worn for his morning meetings into more casual clothes, though still impeccably tailored. "I had swimwear added to your wardrobes this morning," he continued, stepping closer. "Good morning, Lily." My daughter, usually shy around strangers, beamed at him. "Hi, Mr. Alexander. Can I really swim in your pool?" "Of course." He crouched to her level, his expression softening in a way I'd only seen when he addressed her. "It's heated, too. Very comfortable. Thank you." Lily bounced on her toes, then looked up at me. "Can we, Mama, please?" I felt trapped between my daughter's excitement and my discomfort, with accepting yet another offering from this man. "I suppose for a little while." "Excellent," Alexander said, rising. "The changing rooms are through there. Everything you need should be inside." He turned to me, his voice dropping slightly. "Perhaps afterward we could continue our conversation from last night while Lily rests." The reminder of his proposal sent a flutter of anxiety through me, but I nodded. "We should talk, yes." While Lily splashed happily in the shallow end of the pool, I sat at the edge with my feet in the water, watching Alexander swim powerful laps. His body was lean but muscled, marked with several scars that hinted at a violent past. When he finally pulled himself out of the water and sat beside me, droplets running down his chest, I found myself looking away, uncomfortable with my own awareness of him. "She's a wonderful child," he observed, watching Lily play with the floating toys that had magically appeared poolside. "Bright, spirited. She's everything to me," I said simply. Alexander was quiet for a moment. "I never had siblings. My mother died when I was young, and my father..." He trailed off, his expression hardening. My father was not a family man. It was the first truly personal detail he'd shared. "I'm sorry." He shrugged, the casual gesture at odds with the tension in his shoulders. It shaped me, made me value certain things. His eyes returned to Lily. Family loyalty, protection. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression darkening. "We need to talk, now." Alarmed by his sudden shift in tone, I called Lily out of the pool. A female staff member appeared as if summoned, offering to help Lily change and have some lunch while the adults talked. Once Lily was settled with lunch and cartoons in our suite, Alexander led me to his office. A sleek space dominated by a desk facing floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. He didn't sit, but paced behind the desk, his earlier relaxed demeanor completely gone. "Marcus has escalated the situation," he said without preamble. "He attempted to break into your apartment early this morning. When he couldn't get in, he vandalized the door and threatened your neighbor who came to investigate the noise." Horror washed through me. "Is Mrs. Patel all right?" Shaken but unharmed, my people intervened before anything serious happened. He stopped pacing, fixing me with an intense look. "Emma, this changes the timeline. He's growing desperate, which makes him unpredictable," I sank into a chair, trying to process this new development. What does that mean for us? For Lily? Alexander moved around the desk, kneeling before me and taking my hands in his. The gesture was so unexpected, so intimate, that I didn't pull away. It means you need to make a decision, he said, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. Stay here, where I can guarantee your safety, or let me arrange for you to disappear. New identities, new location, completely off the grid. The options spun in my head. Disappearing meant leaving everything behind. My job, the few friends I had, the life I'd built for Lily. Staying meant binding our future to Alexander Castillo, a man who operated in shadows, who had invaded my privacy, who clearly saw me as something to possess. If we stay, I said slowly, what exactly would that mean, in practical terms? His thumbs traced circles on my palms, the touch distracting. You would accept the position we discussed. Lily would have a home here, with access to private tutors, the best education. You would have financial security, protection. His eyes held mine. And you would have me. As what? I whispered, needing clarity even as I feared the answer. Initially, as your employer. Over time, perhaps as something more, if that's what you wanted. He released one of my hands to brush his fingers against my cheek. I'm attracted to you, Emma. More than attracted. But I meant what I said. I won't force anything. The sincerity in his voice was compelling, as was the warmth of his touch. For a woman who had been alone for so long, shouldering every burden by myself, the promise of protection, of having someone powerful on my side, was almost irresistible. And Marcus? I asked, my voice barely audible. Alexander's expression hardened. Leave Marcus to me. The implication hung heavy in the air. I should have been horrified, should have run as far from this man as possible. Instead, I found myself nodding slowly. We'll stay, I said, the words feeling momentous as they left my mouth. At least until the situation with Marcus is resolved. After that, we'll see. Satisfaction gleamed in Alexander's eyes. He raised my hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles that sent an unexpected shiver through me. A wise decision. He rose, returning to business mode so quickly I felt dizzy from the transition. I'll have your things brought from the apartment today. Is there anything specific Lily needs that might not be obvious? I listed a few of Lily's favorite toys and books, still trying to process the choice I'd just made. Had I sold my soul for security? Or was I simply making the best decision for my daughter in an impossible situation? There's one more thing, Alexander said, watching me closely. Marcus contacted your phone several times this morning. Threatening messages. My blood ran cold. My phone is in my purse in the bedroom. I haven't checked it. I had my security team monitor communications to your devices since the situation developed, he explained, unapologetic about yet another invasion of privacy. The content of the messages concerns me. He's becoming increasingly unhinged. Before I could respond, a knock at the door interrupted us. One of Alexander's security men entered, his expression grave. Sir, we have a situation. Marcus Denton has been spotted near the property perimeter. Alexander's entire demeanor changed in an instant, his face hardening into something dangerous and cold. He issued rapid commands about security protocols and surveillance, then turned to me. Stay here, he ordered, no trace of the gentle man who had kissed my hands moments before. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me. Fear gripped me. Lily is safe, he assured me, already moving toward the door. The house is on lockdown. No one gets in without going through me first. As the door closed behind him, I did as instructed, turning the heavy lock. Through the windows, I saw security personnel moving across the grounds with purpose, communicating via earpieces. The beautiful home had transformed into a fortress. I sank back into the chair, the magnitude of my decision crashing over me like a wave. In the space of 5 days, I had gone from independent single mother to being under the protection and power of a man who operated outside the law, a man who clearly wanted more from me than just my presence in his home. And the most frightening realization of all? Part of me wanted to give it to him. Time crawled by in Alexander's office. Through the windows, I watched security personnel patrolling the grounds, their movements precise and coordinated. Twice I tried calling the suite where Lily was staying, but no one answered, intensifying my anxiety. After 30 agonizing minutes, the office door unlocked. Alexander entered, his expression grim but controlled. Behind him stood 2 of his security men, flanking a third person whose appearance made my blood freeze, Marcus. Thinner than I remembered, his once handsome face haggard and marked by a fresh bruise blooming along his jaw. His hands were secured behind his back, and his eyes, when they found mine, contained equal parts hatred and fear. "Emma!" he spat, struggling against the men holding him. "Still hiding behind others, I see." Alexander's hand shot out, gripping Marcus's throat with such sudden violence that I gasped. "You speak to her with respect," he said, his voice deadly quiet, "or you don't speak at all." Marcus's face reddened as he struggled for breath until Alexander released him with a look of disgust. "Leave us," Alexander commanded his men. "Wait outside." They exited without question, leaving the 3 of us in a triangle of tension so thick it seemed to distort the air. "Sit," Alexander told Marcus, pushing him roughly into a chair before turning to me. His expression softened fractionally. "Are you all right?" I nodded, unable to form words, my eyes fixed on the man who had once promised to love me forever, who had fathered my child, who had abandoned us both and stolen everything we had. "Your ex-husband has quite a story," Alexander continued, leaning against his desk, his posture relaxed but his eyes vigilant. "He seems to believe you're hiding assets that rightfully belong to him." Marcus glared at me. The jewelry was my grandmother's, not hers. She took it when I left. "Liar," I whispered, finding my voice at last. "Those pieces were from my grandmother. You knew that. You were with me when my mother gave them to me after she died. Always the victim," Marcus sneered. "Tell that to the men who are going to kill me if I don't deliver what I promised." Alexander observed our exchange with cold interest. "Mr. Denton here owes considerable sums to some very unpleasant people even I prefer not to do business with." He moved to stand behind Marcus's chair, his hands resting on the back in a gesture that appeared casual but contained unmistakable menace. "He's managed to convince them that your family heirlooms are worth enough to clear his debts." "They're not," I said, meeting Marcus's desperate gaze. "They're just old pieces with sentimental value." "You're lying," Marcus hissed. "Your mother told me they were valuable, antiques, worth at least 50,000. I shook my head, genuine confusion joining my fear. "That's impossible. My mother barely had enough money for rent most months. If those pieces were valuable, she would have sold them during one of her many financial crises." Something in my tone must have convinced him because Marcus's expression crumbled from anger to despair. "No," he whispered. "No. They have to be worth something. They have to be." "How much do you owe?" Alexander asked, his tone conversational but his eyes hard. Marcus swallowed. 70,000, plus interest. "And who holds this debt?" "The Vega brothers." Alexander's expression darkened further. "Unwise associations, Mr. Denton." The name meant nothing to me, but clearly, it held significance for Alexander. He circled the desk and pressed a button on his phone. "Bring in the box." Moments later, one of his men entered carrying a familiar wooden container, my grandmother's jewelry box. He placed it on the desk and exited without a word. Alexander opened it, revealing the modest collection inside. A gold locket, 2 rings with small stones, a pearl necklace, and a few other pieces. Nothing that looked particularly valuable to my untrained eye. "Is this what you were looking for?" he asked Marcus. Marcus stared at the open box, his expression desperate. "Yes. That's it." Alexander picked up one of the rings, examining it in the light. "Costume jewelry," he said dismissively. "The stones are glass. The metal is gold-plated at best." He set it down and selected another piece. This one might fetch a few $100s from a vintage dealer, nothing more. Marcus made a sound like a wounded animal. "That can't be right. It can't be." "I had an appraiser examine these pieces yesterday," Alexander continued mercilessly. "Total value, approximately $2,000, hardly enough to cover what you owe the Vegas." The revelation hit me with unexpected force. Alexander had not only located my jewelry, but had it professionally appraised, all without my knowledge. The violation should have outraged me. But in that moment, all I felt was a strange relief that the items truly were as worthless as I'd always believed. "You're a dead man," Marcus whispered, all color draining from his face. "And if they don't get their money, they'll come after Emma and Lily too." At the mention of my daughter's name, something in Alexander changed. The controlled businessman vanished, replaced by something dangerous and primal. He moved with startling speed, gripping Marcus's chin and forcing his head up. "Let me be perfectly clear," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet somehow filling the room. "Emma and Lily are under my protection now. My name, my roof, my resources. If anyone threatens them, they answer to me." The implications of his words settled over us all. My status in Alexander's household was being publicly declared, not just to Marcus, but to whoever might come looking for him. "The Vegas work for me," Alexander continued, releasing Marcus with a small shove. "Their operation falls under my territory, a fact you would have known if you'd done even minimal research before borrowing from them." Marcus's expression morphed from terror to confusion. "They work for you?" "Indirectly, but yes." Alexander straightened his cuffs, a casual gesture at odds with the tension in the room. "Which means your debt is now mine to resolve." Hope flickered across Marcus's face. "You'll pay it?" Alexander's laugh was short and without humor. "No. But I'm offering you a choice, Mr. Denton. Option 1. I call the Vegas, explain that you attempted to defraud them with worthless collateral, and let them handle you as they see fit." He paused, letting the implication sink in. "Option 2. You disappear. New identity, new location. Far from here. You never contact Emma or Lily again. You forget they exist." "And my debt?" Marcus asked, visibly trembling now. "Considered paid, with interest." Alexander's eyes were cold, in exchange for you vanishing permanently from their lives. I watched this negotiation for my future, for Lily's future, unfold with a surreal sense of detachment. The man I had once loved, who had fathered my child, was being offered a chance to walk away from us forever, and some part of me knew that Alexander's offer wasn't generosity, it was possession. He was removing a competitor, clearing his path to us. "How do I know you'll keep your word?" Marcus asked, his earlier bravado completely gone. "You don't," Alexander replied simply, "but considering your alternatives, I suggest you take the risk." He glanced at his watch. "You have 30 seconds to decide." Marcus looked at me, really looked at me for the first time since entering the room. "Emma, is this what you want? To stay with him? Do you know what he is?" The question cut through my numbness. Did I know what Alexander was? A criminal, certainly. Dangerous, undoubtedly. A man who had invaded my privacy, manipulated circumstances to bring me into his orbit, and was now effectively purchasing my ex-husband's permanent absence. But also, a man who had protected my daughter when no one else could. Who had offered us security after years of struggling alone. Who looked at me with a hunger that made me feel simultaneously valued and vulnerable. "I know enough," I said finally. "Just take the deal, Marcus. It's better than you deserve." Something like regret flashed across his face. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For everything. For leaving. Tell Lily." "Lily believes her father is dead," I interrupted coldly. "And that's how it's going to stay." Marcus flinched as if struck, but nodded slowly. "I'll take option 2. He told Alexander. "Wise choice." Alexander pressed a button on his desk phone. "Raymond will handle the arrangements. You'll leave tonight." Within minutes, Marcus was escorted out, a broken man being led to an uncertain future of his own making. As the door closed behind him, the office fell silent, except for the distant sound of waves against the cliffs below. Alexander moved to a cabinet, poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, and brought one to me. "Drink," he suggested. "It helps." I accepted the glass, taking a small sip that burned all the way down. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Now?" He sat on the edge of the desk, studying me with those intense eyes. "Now you begin your new life here, With me and Marcus? We'll be on a flight to South America tonight. New name, new documentation, enough startup money to establish himself somewhere remote. He'll be warned that any attempt to contact you or return to the country will void our arrangement. Alexander's tone made it clear what that would mean. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt unmoored, caught in a current much stronger than myself. And us? What exactly are we to each other in this new arrangement? Alexander set down his glass and moved to kneel before me, taking my free hand in his. Whatever you want us to be, Emma. I meant what I said before. I won't force anything. You'll have your position here, your own space, your independence. But you want more, I stated, meeting his gaze directly. Yes, he admitted without hesitation. I want you. All of you. But I'm a patient man. I can wait until you're ready. The sincerity in his voice was compelling, as was the gentle way he held my hand, as if I were something precious rather than something owned. And despite everything, despite all the red flags and warnings, I felt myself leaning toward him, drawn by a force I didn't fully understand. I need time, I said finally, to adjust. For Lily to adjust. He nodded, bringing my hand to his lips in what was becoming a familiar gesture. You have it. All the time you need. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. When Alexander called permission to enter, a staff member appeared with the news that Lily was asking for me. Go to her, Alexander said, releasing my hand. We'll continue this conversation another time. As I rose to leave, he caught my wrist gently. Emma, he said, his voice low and intimate. Welcome home. The words should have terrified me. Instead, they settled over me with an unexpected weight of truth. This was home now. This mansion. This life. This dangerous, compelling man who had inserted himself into our existence with such calculated precision. And as I walked toward my daughter, toward our new reality, I realized that the cage I had feared might also be a sanctuary. Alexander Castillo was a dangerous man, but his danger was now turned outward, protecting rather than threatening us. Time would tell whether I had made a devil's bargain or found an unexpected salvation. But for now, for today, Lily was safe, Marcus was gone, and I had chosen this path with open eyes. Whatever came next, we would face it together. The single mom, the little girl, and the Mafia boss who had claimed them both as his own.